MGX Minerals is revolutionizing the new energy economy with patented lithium extraction technology, replacing traditional solar evaporation using low-cost, low-energy nanofiltration. The first system of this paradigm shift technology is currently being commissioned. MGX Minerals trades on the CSE, symbol XMG, the OTCQB, symbol MGXMF, and Frankfurt, symbol 1MG. For more information, visit our website, mgxminerals.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Ted Dixon. He's CEO of Inc. Research. He's a Horizon Canadian Insider Index ETF 2017 Fund Data Fund Grade A Plus Award winner. His website, CanadianInsider.com. Welcome back to the show, Ted.
Well, it's great to be back, Jim.
The TSX index for 9 days had a rising session. First time they've done that since November 2014. Is that a good sign for Canadian investors?
Well, when the TSX is doing well, there's plenty of opportunity in the Canadian market. Our index, the Canadian Insider Index, just closed 2 new all-time highs on Tuesday and Wednesday, and this morning, Thursday, it also opened up at a new all-time high. Now we'll see if that lasts. I never like to see big moves early in the morning. It often sets up for a reversal in the afternoon. But look, there's been a stealth rally going on here, and people don't believe it. I mean, the Canadian market in general has outperformed the U.S. market the last 3 months now, and there's still a lot of pessimism towards Canada. I was listening to one of your mainstream competitors when I was driving in my fossil fuel powered car the other day. So it's a little hard to get HowStreet.com in the car when you're driving. So I was listening to this financial advisor say that she was the most underweight Canadian stocks that she had been in many, many years, and wearing it as a badge of honor. So I'll just leave that with your listeners. Your listeners are a pretty astute group, and they know that the best opportunities are when people are down and depressed about something, and you want to be taking your profits when everybody's banging the drum, telling you how great things are with the Canadian market. And we're certainly not at that point yet, but you certainly don't want to wait until you see oil, trading at new highs, which is probably where we're going to go. It's not a forecast, but the oil market tends to move in these kind of prolonged, sometimes irrational moves, either to the upside or the downside. And it certainly looks like it's got some legs right now, and that's certainly what insiders are telling us.
Oil prices topped $72 a barrel briefly today, and it hasn't been that high again for about 4 years. So what's happening in oil to make it so strong? And we didn't have a downturn in oil prices over the winter, which we usually do. Well,
that's right. So, we're making some headway from the many years of depressed oil prices. And the question is whether we will see this move continue. Now, you have a very good technical analysis about commodities usually on This Week in Money, and your friends at Chartworks usually provide an overview, and they may have some insight in terms of the shorter term outlook on the oil market. But broadly speaking, this is a industry that has been underinvesting in drilling and digging holes, looking for new oil for quite some time, perhaps outside of certain pockets in the United States. And what's interesting in the United States now is that you're starting to see bottlenecks in Permian. There's been so much production coming online that it almost sounds like Canada. They can't get all their oil to market. So, we've got this massive gloom hanging over the Canadian oil patch that everything in Canada, is lagging the rest of the world, and to some extent that's true. But we have been working on the problems. Companies have been rationing their capital budgets to try and keep cash flow going, and lo and behold, we may actually get a pipeline or two built, both natural gas and crude oil. So the outlook for the Canadian oil patch seems to be improving. And is it there yet? No, but you don't want to be making your investments after everyone realizes, things are better now and, the fundamentals are great. If you're going to make some money in the stock market, or in any market, for that matter, you have to be ahead of the curve. And there still seems to be some time here in the Canadian oil patch to make some money, provided, of course, that oil prices do stay firm. It's a hard market to call, but right now the trend is your friend.
Also, they're predicting by the end of the year, the U.S. will become the world's biggest oil producer.
Well, that's right. But they're starting to see bottlenecks in the Permian. They're trucking, in some cases, oil to market, and that's even worse than oil by rail here. At least in Canada, we've set up a network that can get oil from the fields onto rail cars, which is not a great situation, but it's better than having to truck it in.
In Seattle, they have protests asking for a pipeline because they don't want the oil moving through their port in tanker cars.
Well, look.
Pose that to Vancouver.
This is the head-scratching thing about this whole environmental mob that is out there trying to stop the every pipeline being built in Canada. Did they have their eyes closed when we had the Lac Mégantic disaster where people were killed? Are they blind to what's going on in the rail system, that grain, foods, lumber, and other products can't get to market because the rail system's choking with oil cars? It makes no sense, Jim, but that's politics, and part of the blame has to go to Ottawa for letting things get to this point. You give protesters an inch, they're going to take a mile, and that's what they've seen. And they've been doing very well at their narrative, but there is now, I think, a bit of a backlash coming from the rest of Canada, people who still have fossil fuel powered vehicles and who understand that, wait a minute here, let's just apply some common sense. Does it really make sense to have all these oil cars, being basically the pipeline of last resort for Canada, which is what it's turned out to be. So we'll see how things change. But I can tell you, Jim, we just had our semi-annual rebalancing of the Canadian Insider Index, and insiders are pretty upbeat about the Canadian oil patch, more upbeat than they've been in a number of years.
We'll have more with Ted Dixon right after the break.
Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp., RMO, on the TSX Venture Exchange. Rainy Mountain's Brunswick property is located in the Rideout Shear Zone in Ontario, with grab samples running as high as 32 grams per ton gold. A follow-up drill program to test numerous targets located by recent groundwork is planned for early 2018. Please visit our website at rmroyalty.com.
Vatic Ventures Corp. is a potash exploration company focused on the Korat Basin in Thailand, the world's largest undeveloped potash resource. Vatic's management has extensive potash exploration and development experience in Thailand. Vatic will have marketing advantage compared to Western producers. Drill program commences this spring. Vatic trades on the TSX Venture, symbol VCV, and on Frankfurt, symbol V8V2. Visit our website, vaticventures.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Ted Dixon. Ted, Alberta Premier Rachel Notley seemed to have kind of a little evil grin on her face when she announced that they have passed their oil restriction bill that they will use to restrict oil and gas to BC if BC doesn't stop resisting the Kinder Morgan pipeline. What if BC decided to retaliate by saying they won't stop the shipments of Alberta and Saskatchewan grain, but they'll inspect every car for bugs to make sure they're not bringing any infestations into British Columbia?
Right. I mean, we've got. Let's be clear here. We've got a constitutional crisis, and everyone's saying it's not a crisis. No, it's a crisis. When you've got BC basically trying to use the courts to stop a federal project, which is what John Horgan is trying to do. He'll try and spin it every other way. But no, they have an agreement with the Green Party to use every tool possible to stop the Kinder Morgan pipeline. That's what he's doing. I really hope that the BC Court of Appeal, which is hearing this, deals with this expeditiously and sends a very strong signal to politicians like John Horgan. Don't use the courts for your own political games, okay? But now, so Rachel Notley saying, well, we can do that too. We'll pass a bill that's probably unconstitutional, this what they're trying to do. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I suspect that it's probably edgy on terms of its legalities. Okay, so then John Horrigan's going to come back maybe and do something else that's constitutionally edgy. I mean, this is all because you've got a BC government that wants to cling to power and will do everything they can to stop a pipeline that has been approved by the federal government after due process. Now, this is John Horrigan's making. It is John Horrigan's mess. And you only got to think that Andrew Weaver is standing on the sidelines grinning because he is the maestro here. I mean, I disagree with Mr. Weaver strongly on his stand on the pipeline, but I don't take anything away from him on his skills at the political level to punch way above his weight. And he's really set the national agenda here in a bit of a crisis mode, and it's really quite something to see.
BC's opposition leader says with gasoline prices in the Vancouver area over $1.60 a liter on some days, that BC should remove the gasoline and carbon taxes. Is that a step into unreality?
I think it's something he said that's opportunistic, and I really wish the BC Liberals would settle down and develop some core principles to get ready for the next election. Instead, they seem to be firing, without thinking, and this is another case of that.
Well, there is one province. Back in 1980, Saskatchewan Premier Grant Devine promised, that's back in the days of 20% interest rates, where he promised if elected he would remove the gasoline tax and guarantee mortgages and farm loans at 11%. And when he was being sworn in, he said, I, Grant Devine, will remove the gasoline tax effective midnight. And someone said he can't do that. Well, at that very time, he was the entire cabinet. Yes, he could. But, and it also lost Saskatchewan something like $350 million. But at the time, it got him elected. So would the Liberals say something like that just to get elected?
Well, they would try, sure. I mean, that's what they're doing right now. However, we will be into a new reality if proportional representation gets passed. So we'll have to see how these opportunistic little one-liners fly with the public. People are waking up, I think, every year more and more to these one-liners. There's just so much information now that people can get, and we'll see. We'll see how it works, sure, but there's a reason why participation rates in elections, remain at depressed levels. It's because so many people are just tired of these one-liners, on the left and the right. People know that things are complicated, and that, when you have politicians who are guided by opportunism instead of principles, people can sniff that a mile away.
Sure, and if we all switch to electric cars tomorrow, wouldn't they just put a road tax on electricity, and so it would be just as expensive as gasoline?
Well, look, you had a fantastic interview with Wolf Richter the other day. It's also, you can get that on HowStreet.com and CanadianInsider.com as well, where he talked about the reality of the electric car is that the battery is too expensive, and until they solve the battery problem, this is all fantasy. And he's right, and so it's a shame that you have the Green Party, instead of putting political capital in perhaps trying to make Canada a battery leader, they've made Canada a leader in stopping pipelines. Well, one's a negative approach, which is what they've chosen, or you could take a positive approach. And then you've got the United States, by Tesla betting, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars on battery technology. Now, whether they'll succeed or not, we'll have to see. But Canada's not really in the race, and it's a shame that we used to have a bit of a leg up on battery technology. Ballard was a world leader at one point in that space. We could have grown on that. We could still do it, but no. Instead, we have the environmental movement thinking that they're going to solve the world's problems by blocking pipelines, and as we've seen, it doesn't work. It just shifts things to rail and shifts we import oil instead from, the Far East, corrupt regimes from Africa. That's what they're accomplishing. But the dependency on fossil fuel will start to go into reverse once a battery is developed that you can put into your car, because the car will run cleaner, faster, more efficiently. But we're not there yet.
What about BC Hydro's attitude towards solar power? If you put solar panels on your house, they say they don't want to buy the excess power from you.
Well, I think that might have something to do with this dam they're building in northern British Columbia that's costing them a few bucks. I doubt that they want a lot of competition for that.
In California, it's now the law. All new homes have to have solar panels.
Right, and they have not spent billions of dollars on a dam in northern California. I think that probably explains the difference of tactics there.
But with their solar panels, they won't need the power from Site C.
They probably will not, depending on on demand and supply. I mean, that's a long way out. We'll see how things evolve. If we do get battery car take up in the next few years, there could well be a demand for Site C power. We'll have to see. A lot of that, though, is faith and wishful thinking and a mixture of both, and we'll just have to see how that plays out.
Sure. Now, what if condo complexes start putting solar panels up so they don't have to buy BC Hydro? I mean, just for their interior lighting and so on, not for the individual suites.
Well, we would have to see. Again, I'm not an electrical engineer by any stretch of the imagination, but there's all sorts of innovations that could really put the economics of Site C in jeopardy. But look, I think the provincial government took a hard look at it, and one thing I am willing to give John Horgan the benefit of the doubt on was his decision on Site C. I don't think it was an easy decision. I think it could have gone either way. I think they took a hard look at it, and on balance, they decided that it was worth doing. So I will, as much as I don't like a lot of things they're doing, you do have to give the governments credit when they make, I think, a reasonable decision. And I think on Site C, given what they were, given the cards that they were dealt, I think they probably, proceeded as prudently as they could.
We'll have more with Ted Dixon right after this.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're chatting with Ted Dixon. Ted, what's the insider outlook for the next 6 months?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, we announced our semi-annual rebalancing of the Canadian Insider Index. Actually goes into effect on Friday, but the announcement's on our index website. You can get to it via CanadianInsider.com. But what we've seen is a continued bet by insiders in Canada on global growth. Yes, I know there's been a slowdown globally Q1, but they're saying it's a temporary slowdown, that things are still hopping globally. We're not into a global recession. And when you think about it, Jim, you look at all the money that the U.S. is throwing at their tax cuts, and it's all borrowed money. It's hard to envision a recession with all that spending or tax cuts that Uncle Sam is doing via being financed by the Treasury market. So they're betting, insiders, that global growth is going to continue. They've done a bit of a switch from the mining and basic materials, forest products area into energy, into the oil patch, including uranium, by the way. So they're really betting on continued demand for energy products. And interestingly enough, though, they've got a little hedge going on in this rebalancing, and they're also hedging. We take it for a bit of a stagflationary scenario, where we've actually seen gold miners bump up in the rebalancing. So we've got 3 gold miners that will be in the index, in the 50 stock index as of Friday, as opposed to 2, and we have a base metal miner coming out. We also have a fair amount of exposure to REITs, which can do well in a stagflationary environment. If you've got enough inflation, often these REITs can pass along rent increases to their tenants. So it's not a 100% kind of slam dunk, or we're going to have a global boom, but definitely they seem to be thinking that inflation is here, and whether it's accompanied by good growth or not is the question, and they have hedged a little bit. So you can read more about what's happened in the rebalancing, again, by going to CanadianInsider.com and going into the website, and you can find the rebalancing announcement in our index website.
Ted, thank you so much with your conversation with us.
Well, thanks for having me back, Jim. It's always a pleasure.
My guest has been Ted Dixon, CEO and co-founder of InkResearch.ca, his website, CanadianInsider.com. If you have any questions for Ted or any of our other guests, or for the show, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.